Welcome to Rachel and Ralph's Reality Check, where us two politicos discuss the top content of the day. And we are going to talk about three different things today. I'm going to introduce you, first of all, to Ralph, my co-host. He is a weekly columnist with Newsmax. And then there's me. I'm Rachel Alexander. I am a weekly columnist with Townhall and other publications. So first of all, we're going to start with an article I wrote for Townhall about UFOs. And basically, I pointed out that the government is finally coming out and admitting that UFOs exist. The government is basically coming out and saying, we know that there are objects out there that we cannot identify. We cannot explain them. And there have been Navy pilots that have come out and said, we don't understand the way these objects are flying. It's nothing, in our comprehension. And the sad thing about it is Republicans who started the ball rolling, exposing this. But Democrats are rushing to get the credit for it. What used to be called a conspiracy theory to believe in UFOs is now becoming normal. And since it's becoming normal, Democrats suddenly are acting like, oh, we were, on board all along. Even Obama has come out and said that, yes, there are UFOs on there. But the reality is, Marco Rubio first tacked on something to a bill last December under President Trump, which said we want to start some serious exploration of the origins of UFOs. This wasn't the Democrats doing it. So what do you think, Ralph? We haven't really talked about this much. What is your whole, theory?
Well, it's not a theory, it's a reality, Rachel. And I have absolute proof positive, smoking gun evidence that the aliens have landed and they're amongst us. And that evidence is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Wait,
Clearly.
You're on the right with us. Why aren't you Sandria Ocasio-Cortez?
All right. Okay. You have your evidence. I have my evidence. But if Marjorie Taylor Greene is not conclusive evidence that the aliens have landed and been elected to Congress, I don't know what that conclusive evidence would be. But it is very impressive after Harry Reid, the Democratic leader of the Senate for many years, and who represents Area 51 in Nevada, had been trying for years to get the military to divulge what their reports are and what they know about what they now call unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs. They don't like calling them UFOs. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm old school. I was born in 1952, which, by the way, just happens to be the peak year of UFO sightings. Now, does that mean I was dropped on Earth by a UFO? It's an interesting hypothesis. I say, bring it on. But in any case, Leader Reid was never able to get the executive branch to fess up. But the Republicans, as you say, finally were able to produce riders in legislation that are requiring the Pentagon to come clear with all of their not top secret, not super classified, not QAnon quality, sorry, Marjorie, information about the unidentified aerial phenomena. And so within a few weeks or a few months, they are going to be presenting a complete report. This has been picked up by the establishment media and finally is being treated as a respectable area of inquiry. Respectable people have been talking about this for a long time. Mercury astronaut L. Gordon Cooper wrote a wonderful memoir called Leap of Faith, in which he talked about his own encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, including stories about how when he was a fighter pilot in Europe, hanging out with the other fighter pilots, back in the 1950s, he said, we saw inexplicable stuff all the time. And the brass, the Pentagon brass, the Air Force brass, said, don't report it or you're going to be grounded. So zip those lips. But it was, according to L. Gordon Cooper, it was really a national hero as one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. He said it was a very common phenomenon. And so now we saw all of the videos called the Tic Tacs that was released from the Pentagon from Navy sightings about 2 or 3 years ago, and now we're about to get a substantial amount of additional information. And thanks really go to the Republican leaders who have finally managed to pin this down and bring it to public attention. And I don't have any opinions one way or the other about it. I don't know enough about it. Many years ago, Rachel, before you were born, when I was in college, I saw what I thought was a UFO floating over the sky, and I got very excited about it. I ran toward it with a bunch of other of the young men who were freshmen at Amherst College, and it turned out to be a balloon, a cleaner's bag with candles in it. And I said, okay, if I was so credulous as to mistake that for a UFO, I'm just going to shut down my inquiry about that and wait till something starts becoming very much more definitive. So I switched the burden of proof. So since 1970, so we're talking about 50 years ago, I've been basically agnostic about it. But frankly, there's a lot of curiosity on the part of a lot of people, and I think rightly so. And if by the way, as your column pointed out, there is a lot of really interesting information about to be released, then it's not definitive. Is that secret skunk works projects by the American military who are coming up with the next generation of something beyond stealth bombers and stealth fighters? Is it something that China is doing, or or Russia is doing, or Estonia is doing, or is it some kind of eerie phenomena that we just don't understand, or is it interstellar travelers come to visit us? So I really think that your column in Town Hall really hit a nerve. It's a legitimate point of curiosity, and I for one am very pleased that it's actually going to be coming out.
Well, two things. First of all, I got to pick a bone with you about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Love her or hate her, she is a character. That's her shtick. That's her persona. That's what she wants to put out there. So I wouldn't call her an alien. I would just say, she has a different style from a lot of us. My idol is William F. Buckley Jr. So I'm the exact opposite of her. I don't like to make dramatic statements and dramatic comparisons and use hyperbole but that's just she's just a different type of a person. I don't understand why you don't see that about her and you just buy into the left-wing media spin like she's some horrible person when we all know it's just they're using her style against her to claim that she's horrible.
I'll meet you halfway, Rachel. I will stipulate that she is a legal alien. How would that do? But just to give her credit where it's due, look at the T-shirt that I'm wearing, and I don't know if our viewers are going to be able to read it or not, but it says,
"You set this up. You totally set this up."
Space laser core, Mazel Tov. So I'm indebted to Marjorie Taylor Greene for having outed the secret Jewish space laser corps, of which I am a high official. So,
well, ridiculing people on the right is not going to help our cause. I mean, if you don't like their style, just don't pay attention to them. I mean, that makes them go away. My other issue I had was, so why do you think the government has, hid all this research into UFOs from us for so many years? And basically their only statements until recently have been, we don't have any evidence of UFOs. We have no statement.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't really speculate as to their motivation. Having worked in the government, not in the national security apparatus or the defense apparatus for almost 40 years, I can say that they tend to be secretive particularly about things that they don't understand. They do not want to look stupid. They do not want to look less than omniscient, and they do not like being held accountable, particularly for things over which they have no control. So their propensity to be secretive about stuff, which they have the power to do by their by virtue of being able to classify stuff, is, I think, uh, I don't know if I could say this, if the FCC will let me say this on YouTube, but CYA. I think they may be doing, I suspect that there may be a lot of CYA going on here, but on the other hand, they may have perfectly legitimate reasons about not. I mean, look what happened in the 1950s when Orson Welles did a radio show called War of the Worlds, adapted from H.G. Wells's novel about the invasion of Earth by Mars. And he did that as a radio drama, and it created mass hysteria. It created panics all over the East Coast. When even though he basically said this is a dramatization, but people missed that, and they thought we were really being invaded by the Martians. And so it may be something perfectly benign that the military didn't want to stir up a mass panic by letting out poorly understood information that could be consistent with the idea that aliens are here and maybe even invading. That could be a very scary scenario. So maybe they're just protecting us from our propensity to fall for a mass hysteria scenarios and narratives, like, say, climate change. Okay, so this is even sexier. This is even weirder and sexier than climate change. So
Not sexy.
if people can fall for climate change, they can certainly fall for alien invaders. So maybe they're protecting us from ourselves. I don't know, but I think the rumors have been circulating long enough. I want to find out what we do know, and I'm looking forward to reading the report when it comes out. So thank you for your column, which gave us a really, really good teaser on that.
And I'll just wrap it up by pointing out in my column to add to what you said. One theory is that because these UFOs have been seen so close to nuclear sites, nuclear power places, that could be why the government is afraid of letting the American public know. So moving on to your awesome article in.
Wait, before we get to my awesome, would you just tell our viewers the name of your article, and so they can easily go to Town Hall, look for your article, and then follow your column there, right? Because if any you write it consistently, one of the most interesting columns in the country, and why don't you lay out a little breadcrumb trail for our viewers to find out and hook up so they can get it in their inbox every Monday.
Oh, yeah. If you go to authory.com, you can find me there and sign up to get my weekly column. And the name of that column, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it was, Republicans were right about UFOs after all, something like that. So anyways, moving on to your column, Ralph, you basically are questioning whether Biden is going to bring about inflation. And I was just wondering if you could answer a few questions about it that some of our viewers might not understand. You talk about how we need to cut tax rates, and you talk about how the governments use inflation to confiscate wealth. And I was just wondering, how do they do that? And how does cutting tax rates fight it? And when government does meddle, does that mean they're injecting more money into the economy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not. This does not land solely at President Biden's door. The Fed, under the instigation of both President Trump and President Biden, have been printing money at a mind-boggling pace. And according to Professor Steve Hanke of Johns Hopkins, who's one of the greatest living monetary economists, he says that the Fed has been printing at approximately a 28% rate, which was vastly overshooting their targets of in M4, vastly overshooting their targets to keep inflation at about the 2% rate. We saw last month, April, that the inflation rate had popped up from about 1.5% annual rate to over 4% annual rate. And Professor Hanke, who is one of my authoritative sources, says that is a precursor of what's about to come. Biden did not cause this. This is the whole federal government has been doing money printing, or money printer goes burr, as the YouTube meme has it, with the Fed printing money at absolutely profligate rates. And eventually, after a lag, as Milton Friedman taught us, all inflation is a monetary phenomenon, but there's a lag between the printing of the money and it trickling through, this is the real trickle down, through the financial markets into the real economy and then into the consumer price index, which is the true measure of inflation, our everyday prices going up. And by the way, the best core measure of inflation is called X food and energy. So you're not looking at gasoline prices, you're not looking at grocery prices, because food and energy prices tend to be very volatile. The core inflation is called CPI X food and energy, which means excluding food and energy. And that's that's the one that went up over 4% in April. And so really my question was whether Biden would take the necessary steps to confront and reduce inflation, or whether he would balk at it. And part of my observation was his chief Biden was in the US Senate the last time we had virulent inflation. He was a junior senator from Delaware, the youngest senator, age 30, which is the minimum constitutional age, elected to the US Senate in 1973, if memory serves me. So he was there right when we got the double-digit inflation and the towering misery index of double-digit inflation and double-digit unemployment. So he had a front and center row seat. He lived through it, and he watched President Jimmy Carter make a complete boob of himself by giving speeches saying, nobody knows what causes inflation. I don't know. I looked, I talked to all the experts. Maybe there's no answer, okay? Which was completely idiotic, because every good monetary economist from Milton Friedman to Bob Mundell know exactly what causes inflation, which is to say the Federal Reserve, under the direction of the President of the United States, although that's done in a kind of sort of off the table kind of way. The President doesn't order the Fed publicly to tank the dollar, which is what causes inflation, to reduce the value of the dollar by printing too much of it. Okay, that as soon as Reagan was elected, he told Paul Volcker, who was the chairman of the Fed, appointed, by the way, by Carter, but Volcker, we infer, never knew that Carter would have his back. So he didn't do the hard things of cutting the money supply and raising interest rates that were necessary to bring inflation down from 11-12% a year, which is horrendous and totally destructive, pardon me, of the economy, down to the 4% and then 2%. As soon as Reagan was elected and Volcker knew that Reagan had his back, Volcker did what was necessary to quote, slay the inflation dragon, which was very painful. He raised interest rates so that home mortgages would then cost 20%. Okay, but inflation was out of control. He took draconian measures, and whether they were too harsh or whether they were just right, whether too hot, too cold, or just right, it worked. Inflation rapidly came down. As soon as inflation came down, and that was accompanied by Reagan's tax rate cuts, in which he dropped the top marginal tax rate from 70% to 50%, thanks to Democrat Dan Rostenkowski, by the way, and then cut marginal tax rates across the board under the inspiration of Jack Kemp by 10% a year over 3 years. Well, the economy took off as soon as Reagan and Volcker wrung inflation out of the system, and as soon as Reagan and Rostenkowski cut the marginal tax rates so dramatically that the economy went from a recession to 4% annual growth. And in the remainder of Reagan's term, after wringing inflation out of the system, America created more jobs than the entire economy of West Germany, which was then the third largest economy in the world. America added that many jobs in about 6 years. So it was extraordinary. My point was, in the column in Newsmax, and I invite you all to sign up and read me every week, because I write to be read, just like Rachel, but she's the Il Miglior Fabreau, she's the better writer, but I aspire to be as good as she is. We will see whether Biden has the moral courage to stand up for inflation. He is a far more seasoned political player and a far more conservative man than most of the right gives him credit for. And so he lived through it. He saw Carter bumble it. He saw Reagan nail it. He saw what that did to get Reagan a landslide 49 state reelection. Okay. Then George H.W. Bush came along and broke his read my lips, no new taxes pledge, creating a new recession, got thrown out of office, and then was succeeded by Bill Clinton, who under Alan Greenspan, who continued Paul Volcker's excellent monetary policy, and later admitted that he was targeting the price of gold when he was doing it. He didn't admit that until about 3 years ago, but he finally admitted that was he was emulating the gold standard. So he had a proxy for the gold standard. And then, of course, Bill Clinton reformed welfare and cut the capital gains rate, and the economy took off. And we, instead of having deficits, we had for the first time in my lifetime, and the last time in my lifetime, we had federal surpluses. So Biden is a pragmatist. I wouldn't call him either a progressive or a conservative. He's a pragmatist, and I was encouraging him, including by quoting John Maynard Keynes, the first celebrity economist and the icon of the Democrats, that inflation is the most horrific thing you can do to capitalism or to the economy. And so I respect but don't fully trust his advisors, who were too young to have lived through it. So they're book smart, not street smart. Biden is street smart. And I was just writing this. I wish him well. I'm a Republican and I'm a conservative, but nevertheless, I wish him well because I wish America well. And if he stumbles, America will stumble. If he gets it right, America will prosper. So I just wrote a column hoping that his team would see this and that he will turn around and do what if in fact, as I predict, and as Professor Henke and others predict, inflation starts becoming virulent again, he won't just try to wish it away or turn a blind eye to it. He will do what Reagan did and tell his Fed chair, whether it's Jay Powell, current Fed chair, or Jay Powell's successor, who's likely to be Lael Brainerd, who is the dean of the Federal Reserve and a very impressive, extraordinarily brilliant woman, a very distinguished public servant. Whether it's Powell or Brainerd or whomever it is, he will give them the wink and the nod and say, do what you have to do to wring inflation out of the system. So that was my appealing to the better angels of Biden's nature, which I know you don't believe exist, but I'm hoping they do.
Okay, so basically, to summarize, how you answered what I was trying to get to the bottom of, basically, before Biden entered office, the Federal Reserve was already pumping extra, money into the economy because of COVID. Because why else would it be so bad under a Republican president? That is.
Because President Trump was telling him to weaken the dollar. Trump was actively signaling Powell that he wanted a weaker dollar. He was pistol whipping Janet Yellen when she was Fed chair for having too strong a dollar, and he was very vocal. The great Larry Kudlow was attempting to moderate him, but it was not just, even before COVID, Trump was pushing very loudly for a weaker dollar, and the Fed chair tends to follow the clues of the president. So don't exonerate Trump so quickly.
Well, why was Trump pushing a weaker dollar then?
Because he thought it would help our trade balance. He thought it would, he never particularly explained why he was so enthusiastic about a weaker dollar. It's like his nutty ideas about tariffs, which did far more damage to the American economy than they did to the Chinese economy. It was just he was badly advised by Peter Navarro, but he was inclined to believe it anyway. Please don't ask me to psychoanalyze Donald Trump. It's way above my pay grade.
Hey, the liberal pundits come on TV all the time and do it.
Yeah, I know, it's way above their pay grade. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I have a toxic amount of humility compared to the liberal pundits. Forgive me.
No, that's why you're on the show with me. So basically, you know, it sounds like when you make the tax cuts, then companies are able to invest more, and so the economy turns around. And when the economy is doing well, you're less likely to have the liberals want to put, you know, extra cash into the economy, and so that if Biden lowers the tax cuts, then he should have, you know, a lesser push from the liberals to give him all this extra money for spending, you know, whether it's, yeah, go on.
We'll talk about this some other time. Please don't conflate fiscal policy and monetary policy. Okay, just don't. They're two separate things. You can have, it's good to have lower taxes. It's better for productivity, but inflation always comes from printing too much money, irrespective of whether taxes are too high or too low. And by the way, I blame them both for the deficit. The Republicans never, you know, the Democrats created deficit by spending too much, and the Republicans create deficits by cutting taxes. They're all deficit mongers. They all want to provide, they want to give out goodies to their donor base. And the Democrats do that by spending, the Republicans do that by tax cutting. I want nice low marginal tax rates. I'm all for that, particularly capital gains rates. I'm against all of Biden's proposed tax increases, but I also think Biden is insincere. He knows that he's not going to get those tax increases because the wise men and women of his party, like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, are not going to give him these horrific tax increases. That proposing them placates his base, but he knows it'll never pass. So let's talk about tax policy. When you write your next column about that, or when I do, I just want to say inflation is on its way. I'm sorry to say, and I just hope Joe Biden will be tough enough to tackle inflation and bring it down and nip it in the bud and not let it get out of hand, because that is the worst possible thing for you, me, and the American economy.
Well, I just had to push back on one thing. You compared the Republicans to the Democrats, saying they both increased the deficit because they selfishly, you know, want to give money to their constituents that they prefer, whether it's Democrats spending or the Republicans tax cuts. I don't see the Republicans as trying to do that. I see them as trying to give tax cuts to the, you know, middle class, and tax cuts to businesses that create jobs for people to, you know, help the economy. So I don't see that as a, you know, with the exception of the you know, corrupt crony socialists, you know, leaning Republicans, who they do get called out when they're trying to help a friend with a, you know, specific earmark or something like that. That's one thing. But I mean, overall, you can't portray all Republicans as.
Yes, I can, and I just did. Under Reagan, it was a 30% across the board tax cut for everyone. Under Trump, there was big tax cuts for the rich, little tax cuts for the rest of us. And so it was not a supply side tax cut. It was a Republican establishment tax cut that went to the, you know, that favored big business and favored the country clubbers. So I don't, supply side is equitable. It's as much for us working people as it is for the fat cats. And I'm frankly, I believe not just Trump, but the entire Republican Party has become a shill for the fat cats, and much less of a representative of us working people than Reagan and Kemp were. So I'm sorry, I refuse to drink your Kool-Aid and exonerate everything the Republicans do. I'm for tax rate cutting. I absolutely am. Look at my record. I've been fighting. I've been on the barricades for that for 35, 40 years. Okay, so I'm no high taxer. But what really counts, and what the Republican Party, as well as the Democrats, have lost sight of, is reconfiguring the tax code to promote economic growth. If we can get the U.S. economy growing at Reagan-Clinton 4% rates, then the rising tide, to quote John F. Kennedy, will lift all the boats. Okay, the deficit will go away. The demands for relief payments will disappear. And so I am all for supply side tax rate cuts. I'm not for passing out big goodies to the big donors. I'm sorry.
Well, I never said that the Trump tax cut bill was perfect, and and when you mentioned tax cuts for big business in it, well, I said before, there's an argument that when you give tax cuts to businesses, that helps the economy. So, unless you can specifically say, hey, look, this congressman has stock in this business, that's why he's giving this business a tax cut. Okay, yeah, that's cronyism. But for a lot of businesses, it's just trying to help the economy. But anyways, do you want to wrap up with your blue collar topic we came up with for today?
Yeah. Well, as another columnist, Jeff, I'm now drawing a blank on his name, noted, driving around Texas, all of the car lots, which are usually filled, end to end with brand new, sparkling new cars, almost a year's inventory in Texas, are dead empty. There are no cars in the new car lots, and it's not just Texas; it's from sea to shining sea. We are now having a complete deficit of new cars available for sale. And by the way, in the used car aftermarket, everything is selling for 20% or more of Blue Book value, because people can't get new cars. If they need a car, they're bidding up the price of the used cars. So cars are something that all of us working people really understand very well. Now, why you can get 20% more for your used car than you could have, unless you've got another car sitting in your garage, or unless you live in a big city with public transportation, then you can't just sell your car and pocket the gains, because then you'll have to walk to work. So what happened here was, when the pandemic hit, the car manufacturers said, oh my God, we're not gonna be able to sell any cars. So they canceled their orders for computer chips. Cars are now very high-tech little pieces of equipment, in addition to engines and carburetors and exhaust systems and stuff like that. They are full of 100 every car has 100 computer chips. Well, they canceled their orders for the computer chips. And now that the economy is, and the computer chip makers, most of whom are offshore, by the way, they're in places like Taiwan. They're not in the United States. We exported the manufacture of computer chips. They said, okay, well, we'll reconfigure our lines and sell our chips to other consumer products. And they did that. You can't turn that around on a dime. And so therefore, they've told the car companies that they will not be able to meet their demand for computer chips until the fall or even next year. So we are going to be short of new cars, and we're going to be seeing the price of used cars bid up through most of, or maybe all of the rest of this year. And that makes really vivid how the government policy, like shutting down the economy for COVID, right or wrong, which created a drought on the market for car purchases, which caused car makers to stop buying chips, which caused chip makers to stop building chips for car makers, and now we've hit the other side of the vicious cycle. So this is just my way of saying that Republican and Democrat, they're all complicit in throwing monkey wrenches into the economy, and now we are seeing the evidence of that with these empty new car lots. So bummer.
Well, okay. I just like to point out that I think it's definitely more the fault of the Democrats for the car chip shortage, because they're the ones who wanted all the lockdowns. And, part of the reason that these semiconductor manufacturers stopped making the chips for the cars is because they had so much demand for chips for computers and laptops and monitor screens, because so many people were forced to work at home. The government was, telling everyone you can't meet anymore. And so, that was right in the lap of the Democrats. You can try to say it's a bipartisan thing, but it's not. They were the ones pushing the lockdown. So if you're going to blame anyone, who can't buy a car right now because they can't afford it, I think we can flat out blame the left.
Well, I say there's plenty of blame to go around, and I applaud your loyalty to the stupid party and your indictment. That's the Republicans, and your indictment of the evil party.
I criticize them when they do something wrong. I am not some blindly loyal follower. I mean, I left the Republican Party many years ago and joined the Libertarian Party because I was so mad at the Republican Party. That's the type of person I am. But I'm just calling it the way it is. I am just telling you the reality of how I see the computer chip shortage.
And that is why we call this show the Rachel and Ralph reality check. So, Rachel, thank you for that reality check. You are an incisive cultural commentator as ever, and I can't wait to meet with you again next week and discover what wonderful column you will have written for Town Hall, what wonderful column I will have surprised myself by writing for Newsmax, and to then pivot to talk about how neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are doing right by working people, but we're going to pressure them until they do.
That ends it. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next week.
Thank you all.